WWE just lied about Seth Rollins' injury, and what he did backstage will change everything. The entire wrestling world has been deceived for weeks, and what Seth Rollins just did backstage at Wargames proves that WWE has been running the most elaborate con in recent memory, while we all sat here believing their fake injury reports and manufactured sympathy. The Visionary wasn't injured at all, wasn't recovering at home, wasn't sidelined indefinitely like they told us. He was lurking in the shadows, planning his revenge, waiting for the exact perfect moment to reveal himself and detonate a bomb that's going to reshape the entire WWE landscape. Before I expose every detail of Seth's secret return and the absolute chaos that erupted when he showed his face backstage, answer me this: is Seth Rollins the most calculating strategist in WWE for orchestrating this deception, or is he a coward who needed to hide an attack when people weren't prepared? Drop your brutally honest answer below, because what Seth did backstage at Wargames is either genius or absolutely despicable, and I can't decide which. The backstage scene at Wargames was already tense before Seth Rollins appeared, with multiple factions preparing for their matches, alliances being tested, and the general anxiety that comes with WWE's most dangerous match concept. Production staff were scrambling to coordinate the complex logistics, medical personnel were positioned strategically, and security was on high alert, knowing that with this many volatile personalities in one building, incidents outside the scheduled matches were almost inevitable. But nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, was prepared for what was about to happen when Seth Rollins walked through that door. The first person to spot Seth backstage was reportedly a production assistant who literally dropped the equipment case he was carrying in shock. Within seconds, word spread through the backstage area like wildfire. Seth Rollins is here. The Visionary has returned. The man we thought was home nursing a serious injury is in the building, and he's dressed to fight. Wrestlers started emerging from locker rooms, everyone wanting to see if the rumors racing through the corridors were actually true. The energy shifted immediately from pre-show nervous anticipation to genuine chaos as everyone tried to process what Seth's presence meant for the night's planned events. Seth's appearance itself told the story of deception and calculated planning. He wasn't limping. He wasn't favoring the knee that WWE's medical reports claimed was seriously damaged. He was walking with purpose, with intensity, with the body language of someone who's been healthy for weeks and has been biding his time waiting for this exact moment. The injured Visionary was wearing his ring gear, his eyes had that focused intensity that anyone who's followed his career recognizes as dangerous, and he was carrying a steel chair which signaled that tonight's return wasn't going to be ceremonial or peaceful. This was Seth coming back to settle scores, and everyone in that building immediately understood that blood was about to be spilled. Quick question for you: what's the most shocking secret return in wrestling history? Comment below, because Seth's calculated deception might have just made the list. The target of Seth's rage became clear within minutes when he started moving through the backstage area with obvious purpose, asking people where specific members of the Bloodline were located. Multiple witnesses reported that Seth wasn't being subtle or trying to hide his intentions. He was openly stating that he was there to destroy someone, that he'd been planning this moment for weeks, that his injury had been strategic misdirection to catch his enemies off guard. The brilliant psychology of this approach cannot be overstated. While everyone thought Seth was home recovering, he'd actually been healthy, training, getting stronger, and planning exactly how he would make his return count for maximum impact. The first physical confrontation happened in the hallway near the gorilla position when Seth encountered Solo Sikoa, who was preparing to head to the ring for his Wargames entrance. According to multiple eyewitnesses, Seth didn't say a word. He simply swung that steel chair and caught Solo completely off guard with a shot directly to the back that echoed through the entire backstage area. Solo went down immediately, more from shock than damage, and before he could recover, Seth was on him with multiple chair shots to the ribs, the shoulders, anywhere he could reach. Security tried to intervene, but Seth fought them off with an intensity that suggested he was prepared for this exact scenario and had planned how to handle any interference. The chaos escalated exponentially when other Bloodline members heard the commotion and came running. Jacob Fatu arrived first, and the confrontation between him and Seth was explosive and immediate. These two men have been on a collision course for months, with tension building during Seth's alliance period with the Bloodline and then reaching critical mass after Seth's injury happened under suspicious circumstances that many people suspected involved Bloodline involvement. Now, with no restrictions, no referees, no official match structure, they were finally able to settle their issues with pure violence. Do you think Seth Rollins' attack was justified revenge for what happened to him, or was this a cowardly ambush on people who weren't ready? Let me know in the comments section. The fight between Seth and Jacob Fatu demolished the backstage area in ways that will cost WWE significant money to repair. They crashed through production equipment, sending monitors and cables flying everywhere. They fought through catering, with food tables being overturned and chairs being used as weapons. They brawled into the hallway that leads toward the parking lot, with Seth getting the upper hand through sheer intensity and the element of surprise. Multiple wrestlers tried to separate them, but both men were so locked into their battle that interference was impossible. This wasn't a worked angle where everyone's cooperating to create the appearance of chaos. This felt legitimate, like two people who genuinely wanted to hurt each other finally getting the opportunity. Paul Heyman's reaction when he discovered Seth was in the building was reportedly panicked in a way people backstage had never seen from the usually composed Wiseman. Heyman immediately started making phone calls, presumably trying to reach Roman Reigns, who was in his private locker room preparing mentally for Wargames. The concern on Heyman's face suggested he understood that Seth's return at this specific moment wasn't random. This was strategic timing designed to throw the Bloodline off their game right before the most important match of their year. Seth had successfully planted doubt and chaos in their ranks at the worst possible moment, and Heyman knew the psychological damage could be as significant as any physical confrontation. The WWE officials' response to the backstage chaos exposed the company's complete lack of preparedness for this scenario. General Manager Adam Pearce was running around trying to restore order but having zero success controlling the situation. Security was overwhelmed and ineffective. Referees were shouting for people to break it up but being completely ignored. The usual systems WWE has in place to manage backstage incidents were failing completely because nobody had anticipated Seth Rollins being healthy and present at Wargames. The confusion and inability to control the chaos actually worked in Seth's favor, allowing him to cause maximum disruption before anyone could effectively stop him. Can you name another time backstage chaos completely overwhelmed WWE security and management? Share your memories in the comments below. The most shocking moment of the entire backstage eruption came when Seth finally confronted the person he'd apparently been searching for all along, Roman Reigns himself. The tribal chief emerged from his locker room flanked by Paul Heyman and several security personnel, clearly alerted to what was happening and preparing to confront Seth on his own terms rather than being caught off guard like Solo had been. The face-off between Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, two men whose complicated history spans years and includes both brotherhood and betrayal, was electric with tension. They stood 15 feet apart, both breathing heavily, both clearly ready to fight, but neither making the first move because they both understood the stakes of what was happening. Seth's words to Roman during that confrontation have already become legendary among people who were present. According to multiple sources, Seth looked directly at Roman and said, "You thought you broke me. You thought that injury ended my threat to your empire. But I've been healthy for 3 weeks, watching everything, planning this moment, and tonight your entire world starts crumbling. Everything you've built is about to fall, and I'm going to be the one holding the sledgehammer when it collapses." Roman's expression reportedly didn't change, maintaining that stoic tribal chief demeanor, but people close to him said you could see genuine concern flash across his eyes for a fraction of a second before he regained his composure. The standoff ended not with a physical confrontation but with something potentially more damaging: Seth's revelation that he wasn't alone in his plan to destroy the Bloodline. He claimed he'd been recruiting, building alliances, forming a coalition of everyone who'd been hurt by Roman's tyranny. He said Wargames was just the beginning, that what everyone was about to witness in that cage would be the first domino falling in a chain reaction that would ultimately end with Roman's empire in ruins. Then, before Roman could respond, before security could move in to separate them, Seth simply smiled and walked away, leaving Roman and Paul Heyman to wonder how much of what he'd said was truth and how much was psychological warfare. What do you think Seth's master plan is? Does he really have allies, or was he bluffing to plant doubt in Roman's mind? Drop your theories in the comments. The impact of Seth's backstage appearance on the actual Wargames match was immediate and significant. Solo Sikoa entered the cage visibly affected by the chair shots he'd taken from Seth, favoring his ribs and moving more cautiously than his usual aggressive style. Jacob Fatu was distracted, constantly looking toward the entrance ramp as if expecting Seth to appear and interfere in the match. Roman Reigns himself seemed less focused than usual, his mind clearly divided between the match happening in front of him and the threat Seth represented to his larger plans. The psychological advantage Seth gained through his surprise return was immeasurable, throwing the normally disciplined Bloodline into disarray at the worst possible moment. The other competitors in Wargames had mixed reactions to Seth's backstage chaos. Some saw it as a positive development, viewing Seth as a valuable ally in the broader war against Bloodline dominance. Others were concerned that Seth's rogue actions and refusal to coordinate with anyone would create more problems than solutions. There was genuine frustration among some wrestlers that Seth had chosen this moment for his dramatic return rather than communicating his plans and working collaboratively to maximize effectiveness against their common enemy. This division in reaction suggests that Seth's return, while impactful, might not bring the unified opposition to Roman that some people hoped for. Social media exploded within minutes of the first reports of Seth's return reaching fans online. Wrestling journalists scrambled to confirm details, often posting conflicting information as they tried to piece together what actually happened from multiple second-hand sources. Fans who'd been watching the Wargames pre-show were suddenly getting notifications about backstage chaos involving Seth Rollins and trying to figure out if it was real or some kind of worked angle that would be revealed during the broadcast. The confusion and speculation actually enhanced the intrigue, creating the kind of genuine uncertainty about what's real and what storyline that wrestling thrives on but rarely achieves in the modern era of dirt sheet reports and social media spoilers. The medical evaluation of Solo Sikoa after Seth's chair attack revealed legitimate damage that affected his performance in Wargames. Reports indicate Solo suffered bruised ribs and possible muscle strains in his back that limited his mobility throughout the match. This raises serious questions about whether Seth's attack crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed, whether causing real injury to an opponent before their scheduled match is acceptable behavior even in the context of a storyline. WWE will likely never address these questions directly, preferring to maintain the blurred line between reality and fiction, but they're valid concerns about performer safety and the ethics of surprise attacks that cause legitimate damage. The investigation WWE officials launched after the Backstage incident was reportedly more serious than the typical post-chaos review. Multiple people were interviewed about what they witnessed, security protocols were reviewed to determine how Seth gained access to the building without being reported, and there were allegedly discussions about whether disciplinary action should be taken against Seth for the disruption he caused. However, the overwhelming feeling backstage is that WWE management was actually pleased with how everything played out, viewing the chaos as the kind of unpredictable drama that generates buzz and makes the product feel more real and important. The investigation may ultimately be for show rather than a genuine attempt to hold Seth accountable. Do you think WWE wrestlers should face real consequences for unsanctioned backstage attacks, or should everything be fair game for storyline purposes? Share your perspective in the comments. The revelation that Seth had been healthy for 3 weeks while WWE continued reporting that he was injured raises major questions about the company's credibility and ethics in reporting medical information. If WWE will lie to fans about a performer's health status for storyline purposes, how can fans trust any injury report going forward? When someone gets hurt, how do we know if it's real or just set up for a future return angle? This erosion of trust between WWE and its audience is a dangerous game that could have long-term consequences for fan engagement and emotional investment in storylines. The short-term gain of Seth's surprise return might not be worth the long-term cost of making fans question the authenticity of everything they're told. The broader implications for WWE storytelling heading into the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania season are massive. Seth Rollins is clearly being positioned as a major player in the Bloodline storyline, potentially as the wild card element that finally tips the balance of power away from Roman's faction. His willingness to use deception, his strategic thinking, and his obviously intense personal hatred for what the Bloodline represents make him a uniquely dangerous opponent. Unlike other challengers who've relied on strength or alliances, Seth is employing psychological warfare and calculated surprise attacks that the Bloodline hasn't effectively countered yet. The question is whether WWE will finally pull the trigger on ending Roman's reign or whether this is just another challenger who'll ultimately fall short, adding to the growing frustration among fans who want to see Roman finally face meaningful consequences. The backstage culture shift that Seth's actions represent is worth noting and potentially concerning. Wrestling has always had a tradition of respecting boundaries and maintaining professional standards even while portraying chaos and violence on television. Seth's willingness to launch legitimate surprise attacks that cause real injury pushes against those traditional boundaries and suggests a more aggressive, confrontational backstage environment. If other wrestlers follow Seth's example and start settling storyline issues with surprise attacks that cause legitimate damage, WWE could face serious safety and morale issues that affect the overall workplace culture. The line between entertainment and actual workplace violence is being tested in ways that make some veterans uncomfortable. So here's my final question, and I really want passionate responses on this. Was Seth Rollins' secret return and backstage attack the most brilliant strategic move of his career that proves he's WWE's smartest performer, or was it a reckless, dangerous, cowardly assault that crossed professional boundaries? And do you think Seth's actions will actually help defeat Roman Reigns, or has he just created more chaos without a real plan to finish what he started? Get in those comments right now and let your voice be heard, because Seth Rollins just changed the entire landscape of WWE's main event scene, and where it goes from here depends on whether his brilliant chaos or Roman's disciplined dominance ultimately prevails.